In the spring of 1921, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there was a neighborhood so prosperous, so self-sufficient, and so black that the whole country called it Black Wall Street. 35 square blocks of black-owned wealth, doctors, lawyers, theaters, hotels. A community that had built everything for itself out of nothing in a nation that wanted it to have nothing. And in less than 24 hours, it was gone. Looted, burned to the ground, and bombed from the air. Then, for the next 75 years, America pretended it never happened. This is the truth of Black Wall Street. It started with one man. In 1906, a black entrepreneur named O.W. Gurley bought 40 acres of land in Tulsa and made one rule. He would only sell it to other black people. He called it Greenwood. At the time, Oklahoma had over 50 towns that were all black, built by people fleeing the terror of the Deep South, chasing a rumor that in Oklahoma, a black man could finally breathe. They came, and they built. Because segregation locked black residents out of white Tulsa stores, Greenwood had to build its own. And it did. By 1921, Greenwood was home to roughly 10,000 people and more than 600 black-owned businesses. There were grocery stores and clothing shops, 2 newspapers, 2 movie theaters, including the beautiful Dreamland. More than a dozen churches, restaurants, pool halls, a bus line, a hospital, and a school. Black doctors, black lawyers, black dentists. Some homes in Greenwood had indoor plumbing and electricity, while parts of white Tulsa still did not. And here is the part they really do not want you to understand. Because black dollars were not welcome anywhere else, a single dollar in Greenwood would circulate through the community as many as 36 times before it ever left. That is not just a neighborhood. That is an economy. That is black self-sufficiency, in full color, in the middle of America. And to the white Tulsa that surrounded it, that success was not something to admire. It was a threat. On May 30th, 1921, a 19-year-old black shoe shiner named Dick Rowland stepped into an elevator in a downtown building. The elevator was operated by a 17-year-old white girl named Sarah Page. What actually happened inside that elevator, no one knows for certain. Most historians believe he tripped and grabbed her arm to steady himself. She let out a scream. He ran. That was it. That was all it took. By the next morning, Dick Rowland had been arrested, and the local paper, the Tulsa Tribune, poured gasoline on the rumor with a headline designed to enrage a city. Word spread that there would be a lynching that night. A white mob began to gather outside the courthouse, hundreds strong, demanding they hand the boy over. But Greenwood had heard these stories before, and this time, a group of black men, many of them veterans who had just returned from fighting for America in the First World War, decided they would not let another man be lynched. They went to the courthouse, armed, to protect Dick Rowland. Words were exchanged. A white man tried to disarm a black veteran. A shot rang out, and in an instant, the spark became a fire that would consume everything. What happened over the next several hours was not a riot. A riot is chaos. This was coordinated. This was war. Thousands of white men poured across the railroad tracks that divided Tulsa into Greenwood. Many of them had just been deputized by local officials and handed weapons. They moved block by block. They looted the homes first, stealing everything of value, and then they set them on fire. Family by family, business by business. The Dreamland Theater, the churches, the hospital, the newspaper offices, all of it burning. And then came the part of the story that sounds impossible until you realize it is true. Eyewitnesses described airplanes flying low over Greenwood, dropping burning turpentine balls and firebombs onto the rooftops below. It was one of the first times an American city was ever attacked from the air, and it was Americans dropping fire on other Americans in their own country. By the time the sun rose on June 1st, 1921, Black Wall Street was ash. 35 city blocks, more than 1,200 homes. The official death count was 36, but historians believe the real number is somewhere between 100 and 300 people, maybe more. 10,000 people were left homeless overnight, and the survivors were rounded up and held in internment camps across the city, forced to carry green cards just to walk their own streets. Here is what they do not teach you in school. Not one single white person was ever charged, arrested, or convicted for the destruction of Greenwood. Not one. For burning 35 blocks and killing hundreds of people, no one paid a price. When the survivors filed insurance claims to rebuild the homes and businesses they had lost, the insurance companies refused to pay a single cent, hiding behind clauses that excluded damage from a riot. The very people who had been attacked were told, on paper, that they were the rioters. And when the community tried to rebuild anyway, the city of Tulsa quietly passed new fire ordinances designed to make rebuilding almost impossible. This was not an accident of history. This was an attempt to make sure Black Wall Street could never rise again. And then came the final erasure. For decades, it simply vanished. It was left out of the history books. It was missing from the newspapers, whose own archives of that day mysteriously disappeared. Children in Tulsa grew up a few blocks from where it happened and never heard a word. An entire massacre, wiped from the memory of a nation, on purpose. It took 75 years for Oklahoma to even officially investigate what happened. In 2001, a state commission finally confirmed the scale of the massacre and recommended that the survivors and their descendants be paid reparations. That recommendation was never honored. In 2020 and 2021, the city began digging in a local cemetery, searching for the mass graves that survivors had described for a century. And they found them, unmarked coffins in the ground, exactly where the elders said they would be. The last known survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre lived past the age of 100. They sat before the United States Congress and told their story with their own voices, and in their lifetime, they never received justice. In 2024, Oklahoma highest court dismissed their case. This is why we tell these stories. Not to reopen a wound, but because a country that erases its history is doomed to repeat it. Black Wall Street was proof of what Black America could build when given even the smallest chance. They did not burn it because it failed. They burned it because it succeeded. And now you know the truth of Black Wall Street. If this is the history you were never taught, this is exactly what the truth of was written to fix. The full-sourced story and the ones they buried alongside it are in the book, linked below. Subscribe so they cannot erase it again, and I will see you in the next one.